Hello.
Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about.
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
This is the Curious Fox podcast, where we challenge the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. I'm Effy
And I'm Jacqueline Misla.
Our theme this month is connection. Hailed as the main source of relief from depression, healing from grief, the foundation for growth and more, connection is as important for our species as food and water.
Human beings are built for connection. And at a time when technology makes connecting both easier and more challenging, many feel starved for the real, genuine thing.
From budding romantic relationships to long-term partnerships, to connection with metamours and friends, we're interested in how to build and maintain connections that meet our needs, bring us joy, and help us feel seen.
Today, we're discussing how to make new connections in the world of polyamory and open relationships. There's so many ways to discuss this. And so today, we're going to start with dating.
We were scheduled to talk about connection and dating, and our producer Ben came in with a story, and we thought, what a great place to start. Ben, tell us about the girl.
Effy. Her name is omitted because
we shall call her omitted.
Okay, we'll just give her like a random name. Let's call her Melissa.
Melissa?
So I met Melissa on Hinge, which I think I can already see the look on your face is a bad place to start for this. But I met her on Hinge. We hit it off. She's very smart, and we had a lot of fun just playing around, and our conversations were great. We went on a date that started at 8 p.m. and we ended up saying goodnight at like 3 a.m. We just kept bar hopping all night. We didn't want to say goodbye. Yeah, it was really good. The connection was so good. And we went on another date and at some point in the night, and this is something that I totally learned from hanging out with Curious Fox people. At some point in the night, I was like, I would love to end this night somewhere private.
Oh.
Yeah. And she was a little hesitant. She was like, okay, let's go to another bar first and feel it out. And
I also like your coyness around the subject. Somewhere private.
Yes. I wasn't going to say,
I want to take her home.
Let's go fuck.
Fair enough.
Let's go fuck. That's not my style. So anyway, we go to another bar, and the conversation gets kind of kicking about what we're both looking for. And she talked a bit about some of her past relationships, and she happened to actually mention open relationships and how she's been in a few in the past, and they've made her be a version of herself that she doesn't really like, and that she kind of went into them, I guess, a little hesitantly in any way, and that they're mostly for the guy. And I had mentioned that I had recently started working with you, and that I have been to a couple of play parties, and that I was interested in continuing to sort of explore this new sexual territory that I have no previous experience with. And I was looking for someone who, to maybe do that with, but also I didn't want to go to these parties and feel like very restricted by monogamy or anything of that nature. And the first thing that she said was, okay, this sounds like something that maybe I'm not really interested in, but I might be willing to be like in it for a little while I'm still kind of looking for something that meets more of the monogamy that I'm looking for. And we did end up spending the night together. But then a couple of weeks passed where we were both out of town, and I was trying to keep up the contact, and she was very reticent to be texting back and forth with me. And it came to a head, and she was like, no, the truth is I did a lot of soul searching, and I can't see myself doing that. And I was like, well, I'm not sure how honestly committed I am I feel like I'm more interested in finding myself in a serious connection than I am in, doing kinky stuff at a sex party like once every 3 or 4 months. I would be sad to say goodbye to that stuff, but it's a lower priority item for me. And she's like, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm making you compromise or sacrifice something that you want. And for me, like a vanilla monogamy relationship is the only thing that I want. So it ended, but it felt like it made me feel so sad that this thing had to end that I was interested in, because I mentioned this thing that I'm not even all that, but also I'm still interested in. Do you see the problem I'm having?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I have so much to say.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like, but it also crystallizes the question of what's the difference between open dating and just dating? Because it sounded like you were saying, hey, I want to see you, but I also want to see what else is going on. And she was thinking, I'm looking for long-term monogamy. And so you in the short term exploring other things may make me uncomfortable because it may mean you want that long-term.
Yeah, I think that I was saying that I was interested in something that's basically a phase for me, but I think that she heard something different. Like, I think that she and I weren't speaking the same language.
I think that's like a great place to start, right? I mean, they're like, in your little captured story is the microcosm of all the things that we want to talk about, right? And I think a good place to start is what Jackie brought up, right? Why are we talking about long-term, like poly dating, open dating, before you're even dating? Like, you skipped the dating part and you're now talking about like open dating or poly dating or being polyamorous.
All right, so now I have a bunch of questions for you.
Yeah.
And we can figure out what the order is. But first, we referenced it, but I want us to explore what's the difference between dating around, open dating, poly dating. We mentioned all three, so I want to get, and then when do you discuss, how do you know what you want, and when do you discuss it with somebody?
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. Let's just start terms.
Yeah, a great place to start. So, okay, here's how I segment them in my world and the way I think about it. So poly dating is when you're dating with the intention of having multiple long-term relationships, right? Polyamory, poly, many, amory, love, many loves, right? Polyamory. And the idea is sort of a long-term, interconnected, potentially loving relationships, may or may not be sexual. So I think for me, poly dating is when either you're in it and you're dating other people to be a part of it, or you're dating with the intention of this kind of structure.
Having multiple long-term or real kind of genuine, intimate connections,
right? So that's like poly dating. Open dating, I would say, dating while, maybe while in a relationship, with the idea that you're openly dating multiple people at the same time.
But not necessarily for long-term partnership,
right?
But for sexual exploration or connection or emotional intimacy.
Right, exactly. And I think you can do that while you're in a relationship with somebody, right? So let's say you are in a committed couple, right? And you're open means that you're dating, like committed to each other, and you're openly dating other people as well. And there could be like short-term affairs or like sexual exploration or, fun dates.
And short-term consensual affairs.
Consensual affairs. Yes. Like affairs in a romantic kind of sense, in a French kind of way.
I was going to say, you're European. Affair means something differently in the States.
Exactly. The French style affair, when you're like kind of lost in a thing for a while. And then dating around is the good fashioned dating. This is the pre the relationships, pre anything else. It is when you're like dating around, getting to know people, getting to know yourself. You're not committing to anything. You're not imagining long-term intertwined relationships. It's worth having that conversation because I'm finding more and more people are jumping into this like open dating or poly dating, and they're skipping the dating part, right? Which to me is a little strange because in this country, you do have this idea of exclusive, right? Going exclusive or being exclusive, right? You like in this country, in the dating world, in the mainstream, there's this idea of, dating around, and then two people have this conversation where they say, we're exclusively dating, we're just dating each other. And then from there, they're in a relationship, an escalator,
How is that different from your experience when you were dating? Not in the States.
Not in the US.
Yeah.
There isn't this overt turning point. There isn't this like, we're now dating
the moment when you get the Letterman's jacket and you've officially been pinned.
And so it's interesting that exists here, but for some reason it seems to be eroding. And I think as non-monogamy becoming like, more and more in the zeitgeist, people are kind of clutching onto it from the start instead of saying, I'm just dating for now. Like, I'm not ready to talk about relationships of any sort. And like that, if that's what you are, I feel like that's what you should call it, dating.
Okay, so I'm going to think about my experience for a second because
Yeah.
I have some questions in there. So I was a serial monogamist for the majority of my dating and adult life. Met my ex-husband at 21. We were together for 13 somewhat years, and then started my new relationship with my current wife. We had been together almost 7 years. So for almost 15 years, I did not date. And when I was dating, there were no apps where that was not a thing. And so launching into the dating world after so long of not being in it and reemerging in a world that looked very different than I was expecting and used to was challenging. So I'm interested in your feedback around that. But what it makes me wonder is, to Ben's point, I struggled with how much do I need to know about what I want now with the dating versus the long term? And what do I communicate now about what I want now versus the long term? So what should somebody do when they're first emerging in the dating world? What's the first thing that we should be thinking about? And then how do we communicate that to ourselves and to other people?
Yeah, what should I do?
Help. Okay, so here's, I think, with pretty much all the advice that I give to anybody, often the answer is like this, which is know thyself. You kind of need to start with this, at least an understanding of where you are today, right? And then be prepared to then talk about it. But in terms of, and one of the biggest differences I feel like, let's call it regular dating, right? Regular dating and open dating or poly dating is, with regular dating, people tend to sort of have an idea of the qualities that they're looking for in another person. And then they go on dates and they're kind of chasing that without a real kind of idea of the relationship or what, and there's like they're afraid of like talking about the relationship part of things or an idea of what they want. And they're kind of like, oh, I'd like the other person to be this, this, and this. And they tend to be these like generic qualities anyway. And then you kind of bounce from date to date.
Well, I want to challenge that, because I think like that is, while I would say that is true of the larger society on regular dating, that's not what you actually think monogamous dating should look like. So if we're defining our terms here, like regular dating shouldn't necessarily look like people being afraid to talk about the shape of their relationship, right?
Right. I think that's what I'm hearing in the distinction. That's what resonates, is that with regular dating or monogamous dating, you're looking for the type of person that could be a partner. And the thing that you're focused on is the person, not the type of relationship structure.
Exactly. Because the relationship structure is given. Right? You're looking, you're going to meet somebody, it's going to be monogamous, you're going to be on an escalator.
And have babies.
Oh, I see.
So you don't go around saying, I'm looking for this type of relationship. You're like, I'm
looking for that kind of person.
And that person is a set of checkbox qualities that you're looking for.
And everything else is pretty much locked in.
Exactly.
Or that's what you assume.
Right.
Yes. You go in with the assumption that's what's going to happen.
Right. Which we should note here, that for those who are not interested in open relationships or polyamorous relationships, or you're just exploring, you came upon this podcast somehow, but you're interested in monogamy, all of these things are for monogamy as well. Within a monogamous relationship, defining the types of way you define what monogamy is, what infidelity is, what good relationship and connection looks like, those conversations should not be a given. We should be having those too.
Yes. Absolutely.
So to recap what you just said, so regular dating is pretty much where you are just looking for a person because the type of relationship is more or less assumed. So that's that. So then you move on to open dating, like how that's different.
Yes. So open dating is you have to go in there and talk about the type of relationship that you're looking for. And also be able to talk about where you are today, so you kind of need to know thyself, right? So, I am, I'm in a relationship. I live with somebody. I'm just making this up, and I have, another partner on the side, and I'm looking to date, to meet people, to explore, New York City, or I'm dating to find somebody to, have like short-term, fun, flirty French-style affairs with. So you kind of have to have an idea of what you're looking for in terms of the relationship and be okay to talk about that.
I think as much as you can before you get out there and start dating, you should be thoughtful about that. And I also think that part of it will be figuring that out along the way. I think I dated maybe 3 people before I realized that I enjoy kind of the girlfriend role, if you will. Like I, want to check in and be like, how's your day? And, oh no, you're not feeling well. Can I bring you some soup? And that may not be things that a casual date would do. And that's the role I felt more comfortable with, but I didn't realize that at first. I think I wish I would have, because then that would have, those 3-day, relationships, short-lived, may have gone a little easier. Or I may not have dug into those or explored those more. But there's those ways of doing it, like paying attention.
For sure, exactly. And I think, at Curious Fox, we talk a lot about inspiration and permission, right? And I think one of the reasons why we do, or, that I'm very passionate about it, is because the chances are you may have actually known that about yourself, but the idea of bringing that to the table to say, I'm married and I'm doing this dating thing. And even though I wanted to have the qualities of dating, I like playing the role of a girlfriend. So I want the casualness of dating while the intimacy of a girlfriend.
Yes.
Right?
See, I should have come to you before. Yeah. Yes, all those things.
Right.
Yes.
So I think this is what I mean about like the know thyself. And I with everything that I talk about, non-monogamy, as you said, it just applies to monogamy. It will make your monogamous life better as well. But let's stick to what we have in mind, which is like non-monogamy. And I think this is what I mean about know thyself. Like first of all, knowing all the different ways that you can have a relationship. So like knowing that it is available to you to have a casualness of a dating relationship with the intimacy of a girlfriend. And to be able to ask for it, to be able to articulate that, right? It's not going to be everyone's game. People aren't going to line up around the corner going, I'll be that person. But if you are that clear about it, the chances are you're going to find somebody who's going to be like, oh yeah, I get that. I want to do that.
I'll tell you that the temptation after this interaction that I had with this girl is to say, well, I asked for that thing and basically I had to give up on this connection with someone who I would have liked and maybe would have had a good time with had it not been for that I was honest about this thing or that I knew that I wanted this thing. Like the temptation is to say, well, maybe I should just go back to like looking for a normal monogamous type thing because it's gonna mean not eliminating interesting people like this one.
So I mean, I can give you dating.
We both side at the same time.
Exactly. It was like, so I can give you like straight up dating advice on the side, which is, you may feel like that. What you're ignoring is, qualities that for me that are like coming through for me, like so a sense of adventure, a certain sense of curiosity towards certain topics, right? So there are qualities in a person that pushes back and says, I don't want to play that game. So even though the story happens to be about monogamy and non-monogamy, the quality of the person saying I'm not game for that is probably not the right match for you right now in your life. Right? Because you are just discovering this right now, right? It is kind of intriguing and important to you, even though you're like, I can give it up. Yes, but right now it's intriguing and important to you, and you're like wandering around and experiencing it. Do you want to shut it down, or do you want to find somebody who's equally curious and adventurous and wants to just like check it out with you, with the understanding that that might not be your long-term plan, right?
Would you have regret if you didn't take advantage of those experiences?
Right.
So what you're saying is that if I choose to accept this thing that I now know about myself, right, that it will, even though it'll be harder to maybe find the sort of people, that it is important that I acknowledge that I know this thing.
For sure, I mean, it's important to you enough for you to bring it out, which I think is one of the next things that we want to talk about. Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. Well, but to his point, so one of the pieces of advice that I've heard in the poly world is date within your species, right? So non-monogamous people should date non-monogamous people and don't try to convert a monogamous person because and it sounds a little bit like what you're saying is, should you then be narrowing the field to folks who are interested and curious about open relationships? So I asked that question to you. Should we limit ourselves? And if not, how then do we introduce that we are in and want open relationships?
So the date yourself phrase comes from a great sex educator called Reid Mihalko. He coined that a while ago. And I think when he says that, it's like at least I hear it in multiple ways, like date your species in terms of poly people, date poly people, kinky people, date kinky people. So yes, that's a good safe rule of thumb, right? My experience has been that there are many, many people out there who haven't experienced or even thought about polyamory, non-monogamy, kink, tantra, blah, 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 blah. So if you just stick to your own, like, people that you know, if you date within your species, the chances are you're not going to meet new people, right? And there are plenty of people out there who would be interested in this if they were introduced to this in the right way, right? And I think it's really important. It is, I think what that brings up for me is that when you're doing this, you need to do it transparently, right? So when you're dating, be transparent about where you are, what you're exploring right now, what you're interested in. You don't have to say, this is where I am forever, but right now I'm exploring sex parties, which is what Ben's at right now. Now that everybody knows that Ben hangs out at sex parties, everyone.
Oh, God.
So that's just where you're at, you know?
This is very, very, this is like hyper transparency.
Yeah, there you go. And it is, and I know you, right? And you know, it's my doing that you're hiding out at sex parties, but it's an exploration for you. I know that you're not like, I am now a part of this community, and for the rest of my life, I'm going to be sex parties. In fact, I'm going to conceive my children at sex parties, right? That's not where you're at. You're like, you know, somebody like opened the door to me and I looked inside and it looked intriguing. I walked through, I'm still exploring. At some point I might walk out and shut the door behind me, but right now I'm in that space. And I think there's value in being transparent in that. Right.
So that's interesting, because then what if you are the other side of that conversation? Mm-hmm. What if you're the person hearing somebody say, hey, right now, this is where I'm at?
Great question. Great question, because we often talk about this stuff always with the person who is open or who's exploring, right? What if you go on that first date? Maybe you even, I do want to talk a little bit about online dating, and I believe that it should be on your profile, but we can talk about that in a little bit. So you met somebody in real life and somebody brings, you know, so you met somebody in real life, someone's like, yeah, I'm kind of into, like, I'm interested, or I have a partner and we're in an open relationship, or I'm kind of interested in sex parties. Here's what I would advise those people. Pause, take a breath, check in with yourself, right? If you haven't, like, an instant, absolutely no way, I don't want to even, like, be across from this person for one more second, walk away, right? You're entitled to whatever. If you're able to just sit in it for a minute, I really, really would advise you to see if you can take a sidestep into curiosity and just ask them what it's about, right? Because I think that, one, it makes for an interesting conversation. Two, it makes for an incredibly revealing conversation. Like, what's up with this person? Why are they interested? What is an open relationship? How does that function? What does that look like? How do they make it work? You know, what is a sex party? Why would somebody go to a sex party? Like, I would, my recommendation would be to go into curious mode. And the reason why I say that is because even though it might not be for you, well, number one, you might suddenly discover, like, something is intriguing, right? You might hear something that, like, touches a point that you're like, ooh, you know what? That's something that I really would want to explore, right? Or it will give you, you'll learn something new, just like something that exists in the world that is new and exciting and different, that you just get to learn about firsthand experience.
And it gives you, the person defining what is important for them and their needs gives you permission to do the same. For sure. You know, being in now, I'm in 2 really healthy, beautiful, polyamorous relationships with the opportunity to explore. I have both the safety and loyalty of loving relationship and the opportunity to try new things. Mm-hmm. I have roots and wings. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so if you're willing and interested in what that feels like, you know, you may want to go on a second date.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing that I would caution against, here's the thing. This is why I was like, if you can sit in it for a minute. Now, the noise around us, which is essentially what I call the noise around us, is all the things that we're hearing. It's the TV, it's the radio, it's the advertising, it's marketing, it's Instagram. It's like your bubble where you're hearing the noise. Most of the time we've been told certain things over and over again. Most of us are in echo chambers. So if you meet somebody who's outside your echo chamber, somebody who's you've never thought about open relationships, you met somebody who's saying he or she's in an open relationship, or they're in an open relationship. This is your opportunity to hear something that is not in your echo chamber, who's not in your bubble. So take that, seize that opportunity, and add that conversation, that noise into your general noise, and see how you feel. Because there might be that you think you're a certain way because you just never thought another way is available, or the people who do those other things are weirdos. And then you're now sitting across the table with somebody who's like, this person's actually nice, they're kind, they're articulate, we have common interests. They seem to be really engaged about their relationships and their thoughts, and they're articulate. Not the person I thought would be in an open relationship, right? So just challenge yourself, right? Challenge yourself.
Well, that's what it is. It's like permission, to your point. All that noise layers on external expectations, and then the internal now narrative that was built around the external expectations, and that conversation gives you permission maybe to strip some of that away,
right?
And say,
right.
Who am I underneath all of this noise? Who do I exist underneath all of those things?
Yeah.
And so, okay, so once you get clear on that, and you have that level of transparency with yourself, how then do you discuss, I want this is what this looks like for me? Like, what's the language? Can you give us some tips around how do you actually facilitate that conversation?
Sure. I think what you would really benefit from is to use inviting language. So be open and inviting about your relationship structure. So ask things, say things like, would you like to discuss where we fall on the non-monogamy spectrum, for example? Or questions that aren't more questions and invitations than definitive statements, right? So invite people, ask people like, what are your thoughts on open relationships? And would you like me to tell you about, what it means to be in an open relationship for me? Would you like me to tell you why I choose to be in this relationship? So, and that open and inviting language, rather than saying things like, I have a girlfriend. I have 2 days a week that's available. I'm going to see you between these hours. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So scheduling it out.
Right. And that's just like, that's kind of,
yeah. Well, to your point earlier too, and I also believe this, you talked about using the dating apps well, and I agree that you should be posting this information on there, that potentially the first time you have this conversation shouldn't be in person. I mean, maybe depending on your style, but it's interesting because in my experience, I had an OkCupid account, and it was the very first thing that was on there, right under my name and age and whatever required information they gave. And I had probably 3 experiences. Some folks who were in the world and interested, some folks who clearly didn't read it. And then we would start having conversation. I would reference my wife, and then there would be shock and horror. Or folks who like exoticized it and was like, oh, that means that you want to have a threesome with me and another woman. So despite all of those varied ways of people hearing it, I still think it's really important to put it out there. I don't know. It sounds like you feel the same way.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings about, actually, they're not mixed at all. I have feelings about online dating. So, a couple of things. Online dating seems on the surface like a great way to meet people. But where we are with online dating today is that the apps are designed primarily, first and foremost, for engagement in the app, not to get you onto a date. They want you on the app. In fact, a really good way to sort of see if how that's working out for you is that if you find yourself changing from swiping on Instagram to like getting bored of Instagram and switching over to your Tinder or your Bumble or whatever your app and start swiping on there, if you're mindlessly switching from Instagram, Facebook, and Tinder, right? You are in that loop. You're sucked into the swiping.
Then it becomes more about a game. Then.
Exactly. Like you're getting the dopamine hits. You're getting the swiping, the rush of the swiping. It just proves to you that those apps aren't interested in you dating. They're interested in you being on the app.
But that's actually not how Hinge is designed.
I'm gonna get to Hinge.
All right.
I'm gonna get to Hinge.
But to my point is that it's not designed with the swiping in mind. It is, you do have these personality bullet points that you hit where you see, okay, do I and this other person have a similar outlook on how to approach a dating app? For one thing, you see that, but then also, do we share interests? And you're encouraged to discuss those interests with other people.
And I think some apps are looking at those things and being more, the problem solving of like, how do we make more meaningful connections online? But here's the thing. It's not really about Hinge. And I'm going to talk about Hinge, not because I don't agree with them, but I will tell you why Hinge, like you dating on Hinge, it might be an issue. But I just want to talk about, first of all, what I'm getting to is don't put all of your eggs in one basket, right? So solely online dating is hard. Those apps aren't on your side. They're on their side. They have engagement in mind. And you just like you're doing that mindless swiping, the person on the other side is also doing mindless swiping on most apps, right?
Which is why people didn't read.
Exactly. Right? That's why people don't read. Like they're just swiping. So that's just bear that in mind with online dating. If the only place that you're online dating, the only place you're dating is online, I would review that. And I would also most people have the illusion that, it saves time, right? I can't be constantly going to, events and meeting people. Like, I don't have time. Like, I'm swiping. I don't have the data. I wish I had the data. But I would put money on the collective time that you spend on engaging with the apps in this sort of mindless way, or like how many dropped threads do you have? Like how many conversations that you initiate and halfway through you got distracted and went somewhere else because that connection is meaningless. Your brain isn't acknowledging that connection as a connection, as a real person, right? So just the time that is poured into these online apps, the results are not it's not cost effective, time cost effective. It's just not a good place to do this thing. However, what you get to do on these dates is at least try to be transparent. At least try to put on your profile the things that are important to you. So that is a plus. Now, what I'm saying is that don't do it ever. Just bear in mind, like be really mindful of how you're using dating apps.
And which app is for which type of engagement.
Exactly. And which apps are you dating on? So Hinge, there's nothing wrong with Hinge. I believe their slogan is built to be deleted.
Yeah, designed to be deleted.
Designed to be deleted, right? And they talk about, they encourage and champion monogamous relationships.
Finding the one.
The one.
True. I see the dilemma.
Right.
So then when you found a woman who's also trying to find the one, and you shared that you were interested in.
But I wonder if people on there, maybe this is so foolish. Actually, I can already see how foolish this is. But maybe there are people on there who are basically as disregarding of the branding as I am,
Right. The same people who didn't read that I was married and then were shocked once I shared that via.
I guess the point being that if I'm going to look for people of maybe less traditional tastes, then going to an app that's branded on traditional values is maybe the wrong place to go. Except that the other app that I was suggested that I went to for a moment for interest was Field. And I gotta tell you that it's trash. I mean, I'm so sorry to anyone out there who is, who has stock in Field, I suppose. I don't know who else is really on the side of the app. Yeah. It's trash. Everything on there is everyone's description. First of all, everyone's so afraid to put their face on there that it's sometimes people just put the city skyline on there and say, if we match, I'll send pics. Mm-hmm. But they don't say anything else about themselves. So all you have is a fake name because it's an alias. Mm-hmm. It's like a letter, the letter L, an age, a distance from you. And if we match, then I'll send you pics. Mm-hmm. You don't know their god dang gender. Yeah. So, I mean, it's useless. The thing I like about Hinge is that at least there's the personality, which is the thing that I'm most interested in the first place.
Yes. I don't disagree with you, Ben. I'm not a big fan of Field either for all the things that you've said. It's not, where it's today, it's not functioning very well. And what you've done is you've just mentioned the two extremes. You went from Hinge to Field, right? You're like, I'm doing Hinge, super traditional, and then I like dabbled in Field, which is like essentially an anonymous sex app, right? There are apps that are in the middle, right? Old fashioned, they've been around the longest, OkCupid. One of the most common ones for people who are polyamorous because they've actually put the options in their filters. So they've introduced open relationship, polyamory, as well as a broad spectrum of genders and orientations way back at the beginning of this conversation. Like years ago, they were like, oh, you want to be open? Bang, you can be open.
Which maybe to your point does allow you to do the necessary filtering and it does allow for transparency. However, it eliminates that crowd of people you were talking about that may be interested but have no awareness about this thing.
Maybe not. In the spirit of transparency, my partner, I met her on OkCupid. She was monogamous before this. She swiped and was like, tell me about what open relationships are like. And we started talking about it, and I'm like, let's talk about it in person. And then that was 7 months ago.
Let's talk about it over candlelight.
Let's go to, I used the Ben's line, let's go to a more private location. So I don't know. I mean, and not to say that is the common story,
right.
But that exactly what we're talking about is what happened to me.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing, look, again, I'm not, no one's paying me. Maybe they will pay us for that. maybe we'll get
if you're
paid
any app except field, right?
yeah, exactly. But basically, I think that OkCupid is a good option because it has like a massive user base, and users are used to seeing people having these preferences, right? So if you don't necessarily filter, but you're looking across the broader spectrum of people, you're not in a monogamy, app looking for someone who wants to adventure into sex parties, right? That's a harder quest than chances of you finding somebody like that on an OkCupid. So the moral of the story, I personally don't care about which app. The moral of the story for the listeners is be mindful of the app that you're dating on. Pick the ones that make sense for you. Pick the ones that are more on brand for the way that you want to date. So for Ben, Hinge, I know you have loyalties that we won't bring up, but be poly app dating. Find another app as well as Hinge.
Okay. Advice received.
Okay, so apart from dating online,
that I shed all over,
right? For all of us who existed and dated before online dating, there's a thing where you can actually meet people in real life.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about that? So you're not going to date online, Effy. Where are you meeting people?
Yes, in real life. Put your phone down. Attend local events. If you are really, really looking, if you're like, I want to meet like-minded people. So by the way, if you're new to this, going to places where people self-identify as in an open relationship, polyamorous, and those kind of things is actually really helpful, because until you get your language down and you're in a place that you can be the educator in the dialogue, it's actually kind of hard to trying to figure things out for yourself while trying to explain yourself to somebody who's entirely new to this, right? So a really good place to start this stuff is to date people who are in open relationships or in polyamorous relationships or looking to be in one, and they've been doing it for a while and they have their language down. You can also get good pro tips of how they handle it, right? So attend local events. The thing about people in open relationships and polyamorous relationships, by design, they're social people. And they often throw parties, events, socials, gatherings, movie nights, game nights, endless gatherings. So
and you can
your
check where
gathering.
you are. Yeah, depending on your city. So here in New York, certainly Curious Fox, we have events. The Joy List is a great place to access events where there's connection. But Meetup, I mean, no matter where you are,
Yes.
Meetup has an amazing list of small and large place events that you can meet people.
Absolutely. Just put polyamory and the town that you're in, or open relationship town that you're in, or you will Meetup is great resource for finding local events. And show up, be kind, make conversation, be authentic, tell people it's your new thing, and have conversations with people.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things that you talked about in terms of language is, it's important to learn the language of this world. One of the things that is important in the polyamorous world and open relationships is consent. In terms of how you get involved in relationships and sexual interact and things like that. And so we've talked a lot about this, this consent culture, both in terms of how you interact with somebody physically, but also making sure that people are enthusiastic about whatever. So talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's so important.
Yes. It's definitely a culture, right? So it's it's a way of being, right? And poly communities, open relationship, people who are in open relationships, people, sex positive people. At the core of all this is consent culture. The idea that whatever you're engaging with is that everybody's enthusiastically engaged, like enthusiastically saying yes, like hell, people say things like hell yes or hell no, So understand that the wishy-washiness of, maybe, I guess, sure, if you want to do it, is not going to fly. You're going to have to, understand that you're going to have to own your yeses, know your nos. If you change your mind, communicate and understand that there's a culture that exists within these communities.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of how this girl,
Right.
which I believe I gave her the name Melissa. Melissa's reaction was very much like, okay, yeah, that's not really what I'm ultimately kind of wanting to do, but maybe I guess I'm
Right.
You can almost even just ignore whatever words are coming out of someone's mouth and just read their tone. That's a no.
And even though she was willing to kind of be in it for the rest of that night, if you will, that when she went home, it sounded like when she thought about it.
Yeah,
was still a
she
no.
arrived at no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes that's what it takes, by the way. You don't automatically know, but I think then the answer is, I don't know right now.
Right. And so that's good advice. We talked about the people on either end of the dating table. So if you were the person who is saying, I'm in an open relationship, or that's something I'm interested in exploring, how do you feel about that? You're listening out for someone saying, you know what, that does sound interesting to me. And if you are the other end and you're being told, then you should really answer from a place of, even if you need to pause and say, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm enjoying this conversation. Let's continue to talk tonight. And then go back like Melissa and really think about it and say, yes, let's do this. Let's try it. Or I'm not into it.
Yeah. And just like a few tips on consent culture. It actually, there's some practicalities to it. You'll find, for example, within the polyculture, especially in the sex positive world, people will ask you often if they can hug you, right? So mainstream, we don't have such in-depth understanding and practice of consent, it's sort of non-consensual touching, just random casual touching doesn't really happen in sex positive communities and polyamorous communities. People tend to be a lot more verbal at every stage. Hi, good to see you. Can I give you a hug?
Which is interesting because I went to my, first play party at some point and felt so much more safe than I did at any bar, any party, any event that honestly I've ever been to beforehand. And I think that was a surprise to me, and folks who are not necessarily in the open world, is you assume that there's like this lascivious behavior and people are like hanging from ceilings. And I mean, that does happen as well. There's a lot of, but because of consent culture, there's actually such a respect for autonomy and safety and yeses being yeses and no's being no's, that I think that's important just to
For
note.
sure. Yeah. And also, I just want to put a little caveat since we were talking about this. Often with the consent culture, we obviously end up talking about sort of sex side of things. So that's kind of where it really becomes very practical, right? But I think consent, when I do my workshop, I break it down, which is really helpful for me. My nerdy sensibilities, years of studying Latin for apparently no reason at the time, but now I'm really happy that I did. You can break down consent. Con, together, sent, sentire, together, feel. So the etymology of the word comes from the idea that you and I are on the same page. We feel together the same thing, right? And so consent culture isn't just about touching and sex. And consent culture is about, are we on the same page? Do we want to be here doing this right now with each other? And that is, and we take the responsibility of saying so or saying no. Right.
And that goes back to, I want to say, tip number 1, which was know thyself, because not only, again, on the side of the person who is asking, are you looking out for that, but the side of the person who's being asked to know yourself enough to know what it is that you want. I think what you were talking about in terms of the noise and the external expectations, sometimes I'm going to speak particular as women, we go along with things sometimes that we are not comfortable with. There are many times I'm sure that people have been involved in both relationships, emotional and physical, and you've thought, well, I'm already here. I'm already started. I said yes up until this point. I can't say no now. What are they going to think? I don't want to ignore this person. I don't want to miss their call. and giving ourselves permission to both sit and explore what we want and then say yes or no based on that.
Sure, absolutely. Let me put it this way. Again, just to sort of reemphasize that the importance of consent, right? For regular people, you call yourself monogamous vanilla, like those people. Hear me. Next time you're halfway through your friend dumping her woes over, her ex-girlfriend, and you've come home from your own thing and you don't have brain space to listen to her, but you find yourself, taking her, listening to her and taking her pain, you haven't consented, right? That conversation needs to start with, I really need to tell you, I'm hurting. Are you in a position to hear me right now? Like, I want to tell you about my woes with my ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, whatever it is. That is what we mean by consent culture, right? That is like, I'm about to like emotionally dump on you and I need it. You're my friend. Are you in a good place for that? And then you can say, give me 10 minutes. Let me go meditate, have a glass of water, like gather myself and I'll be ready. Or, you know what? I love you. I'm sorry you're hurting. I just can't do it right now. I had a really hard day and I just don't have the brain space to give you the attention and the space that you need, right? So consent culture isn't just about, can I touch you? Can I fuck you? Can I whatever? It's like, are we okay to do the thing that we want to do right now?
Right. Are we feeling the same thing together?
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you get your language together. You are looking for the enthusiastic yes across the table. You don't get it. Maybe you get Melissa's like, I feel like what I have seen sometimes happen in the world is then the poly preaching begins, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then it's like, okay, so it feels like you're not really so let me give you the 10 tips with the 10 reasons as to why this is awesome. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, don't do it. There is the rhetoric that poly people are more evolved. I hate that. Untrue. There is the rhetoric that poly is more natural. I also hate that. None of these things stand up. You're not more evolved if you're poly. You've just made a decision for yourself, and good for you. It's not more or less natural. Even if it is, it doesn't matter. In the 21st century that we live in, humans in the modern life do 1,000,001 unnatural things every day. So sitting at a desk for 7 hours in a Z shape with a laptop in front of your eyes that emit blue light is not natural, but we do it anyway because that's what we want to do. So to say that polyamory is a natural human way of being is not a good enough reason to encourage and annoy people into doing the thing that you want to do. Also saying it's better, it's any kind of comparative language, don't do it.
I think there's also a difference between we talk about this in nonviolent communication work, right? So the difference between needs and strategies, and so knowing what you want versus knowing how to get there. And so I think a subcategory of poly preaching may be trying to preach the particular type of way in which you want to be open. And I think that's something that needs to happen in those conversations too. This is something, a trap I have fallen in, where you're like, you're open, I'm open, yay! Like, let's hold hands and skip away. Like, we've solved it, we're good. And then at some point in the relationship, you're like, oh, you meant that? Oh, no, that's not what you wanted to fall in love? No, I just wanted to, go to a party together. Or you wanted to meet my parents? Like, no, I just thought that we were going to do this thing. You want to move in? And so having conversations around what does open mean for you versus me, and then not trying to convince, again, going back, they all relate to each other, right? Don't preach about it, look for the consent around it. How then do we do that? Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think, if you have a tendency to poly preach, let me give you tips on how to do that well in a way that it's not oppressive to the other person. Work on presenting the idea in a way that invokes curiosity, not as a prescription to the other person, but if you can make it like, this is the only way to do it well, if you can frame it and be articulate about it in a way that invokes curiosity, and then you innocently, without agenda, respond to that curiosity, is really the only way to get people interested, only authentic, only ethical way to get people interested in non-monogamy, in open relationships, in polyamory. I mean, in anything, to be honest, but like if that's what, if you want to like evangelize, if you really believe that the structure that you've chosen for yourself is good for everybody else or good for the people that you meet, is find a way to present it in a way that it piques their curiosity.
And even going back to nonviolent communication, they often then statements with, for me.
Right.
So even you're like, this is the right structure for me.
Right.
This is really where, yes.
Right. And talk to your experience.
Exactly.
It's for me because this is what I get out of it.
Yeah.
Because it fills this need. Because it, exposes me to these things. And then, see if it piques the other person's interest. The idea is not to convince. Don't try to convince people, because if you do convince people, if it's not right for them, you've led them astray. And they might come with you for a short while, but the chances are they're going to be miserable down the line.
Yeah, it's true. Okay. So we talked about knowing yourself. We talked about making sure that you're transparent. We talked about tips for how to have the conversation. We talked about going to local events and consent culture and poly preaching. Anything else people need to know? And why Hinge is okay, but and okay Cupid, but maybe be cautious of all other apps.
Yeah. Have fun.
I know, poor Ben. This conversation started with Ben telling us, and we're like, let me now preach to you for 45 minutes about all the things you could have done better.
I think that the thing that started happening in this interaction with this girl is it really, it stopped being fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun. It felt like pulling nails to even keep the conversation going. And so no, it's good advice.
Well, I mean, the other thing is you walked away, like you came and told us a story and you were like, damn, I missed out on a connection that could have been, amazing. Right. And you've disregarded the 2 awesome dates that you've had, right? Like you had fun. Like you said, I really like, there's a reason why you're going, I want more of it, because there was some part of it that was fun, right? So I think some of it is also just embracing that part of it and count that as connection. Like you did get to know somebody you didn't know before. You had fun for the 8-hour date that you've had. That's 8 hours of fun you had in your life. Like that is partly a success.
True.
Right. And that's
fair. If success and failure is only whether or not people are together forever,
right,
then that's not a great way of looking at it. Yeah, that's true.
Going back, amazing. We've just come back in a full circle in what I'm about to say. Enjoy the connection.
Yeah.
Embrace and enjoy the connection. Like in that 1 minute connection, 20-minute connection, 8-hour connection. It's a connection. It is, you've grown, whether you realize it or not. You've found things out. And I think if you do end up for some reason in an open relationship or polyamory, if that's where you end up or not, it is about the connections that you're having. Often people are saying the reason why they like being in poly is because they like the connections that they're having. So, I'm a big fan of Kimchi Cuddles, Tikva Wolf. I really recommend you, read their stuff. They often talk about that. Like it is the connection in the moment that is the thing that we talked about that, helps cure depression and helps you heal from grief and gets you to grow, right? And if that connection is 1 minute, 1 hour, 8 hours, it was there. So embrace it.
And that's what we were talking about in the beginning too, about not looking for a particular type of person. But if you really are fully present in the connection, you then will learn more about yourself. For sure. You learn more about different types of people. You're going to have a conversation that you may never have had before.
Like stay in the moment. Don't think about, are we going to date? Are we going to have kids? Are we going to stay in the moment and embrace the moment, embrace the connection?
Okay.
Right? And we came full circle.
We did. I like how that happened.
Yes.
All right. So we talked about going to local events. And we are going to be sponsoring a local event.
Yes.
So if you're in the New York City area on Wednesday, July 24th,
that's next week,
we are going to have flirt night. So if you ever, I love flirting. Can we just pause for a second and say, I love flirting. And I love flirting when there isn't a need or an expectation that that's going to lead to anything else. Like it could, sure. But sometimes just the pure act of flirting.
I hear you loud and clear. Flirting and making out, underrated. Underrated.
Right. It has to like lead to why? Why does it have to lead to I have a daughter, and it's amazing to see her play with other kids. She'll go to the park or go to the beach, and she'll like run up to some kid, or someone will run up to her and say, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then they play for a few hours, and at the end they're like, "Thanks, that was fun. Bye." There's no exchanging of information. There's no conversation around what happens next. It was like, "That was fun. Thanks."
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what is missing with flirting. Like just to like, and if it leads to another connection, fantastic.
Right.
I would find it pretty upsetting if your elementary school age daughter was like exchanging email addresses with other kids on the playground.
Listen, right now they have phones and watches and all sorts of ways to connect. That's crazy to me. But if you are interested in flirting and meeting other people who are like-minded in terms of being curious and exploring many different types of ways of being and connecting and being in a relationship, then come July 24th. We'll put all of the information in our show notes.
We will. And it's our Curious Fox soiree. We're gonna curate some connections. We're working on conversations that you wouldn't necessarily have, but maybe will be a better experience if you did. So we're going to curate some conversations. We're going to curate some connections. We want to make it inclusive for people to come solo, people to come as a couple, people to come as a triad or whatever configuration that you're in. And we want to, we're going to put people in a room. We're going to dial up the environment and see what happens.
Yeah. And if you are hearing this information, you're like, I need to hear more. I want to understand more about this world, or I've been doing this for a while, but this conversation is great and I want to share it with other folks. There are a lot of different ways you can find us. So we exist on Facebook and Instagram and Patreon. We are Curious Foxes. If you love the work that we do and want to support it and support the growth of this so that we can do more, go on to Patreon and please support us. If you are interested in hearing different stories of people who are thriving and seeing articles and being engaged in, the events that we're having, go onto Facebook and get all that. If you want to see what we look like, go onto Instagram and get plenty of pictures. We do a lot of events and we live stream them. And so we'll put them onto Facebook and Patreon. We do the podcast and we record some of our events so that you can come back to the podcast and listen to more of what we do. We actually have a few different types of podcasts that we do. So we have an event that we do each month where we have a panel discussion where we choose a different topic and we explore that with a panel of peers. And so that exists. We also will be doing more episodes like this, and we're going to explore other things like attachment and new relationship energy and infidelity, all the different things that come up as we talk about new relationships and open relationships and polyamorous relationships. And then we have these amazing interviews that we do with people. So we have one that's coming up soon with someone who we met named Ryan, who I don't even know how to, it's you got to just listen to it. It's fantastic. It pushes back on what we think about relationships and families and parenting. And so Ryan is
womanhood and pregnancy and love. And it's one of the most riveting stories I have ever heard.
It's powerful. So we'll share some more information about that soon, but put that on your radar.
Absolutely. Curious Fox podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.